How was this possible? Youth wasn't even an intended effect of the mixture. Why would this happen? It was just another illusion. It had to be. I pulled away from the bowl and rubbed my head rapidly, returning to the water again soon after, expecting the vision to have disappeared, but it didn't. All the changes remained, no matter how hard I rubbed my eyes. Nothing would return to normal. All at once, it made sense. My spry nature, the lack of creaky joints, the energy I'd suddenly had. Excitement burst forth from me rapidly upon my new realization. I hadn't failed after all. This was even more of a success than I could possibly imagine. I reached underneath the sleeve of my robe to grip a small portion of my skin tightly in a pinch. I barely winced, but felt the sharp edge of my fingernail dig in, enough to wake any sleeping person to ensure this was no dream. Cautiously opening my eyes, nothing changed. The reflection remained youthful in the bowl, and everything else stayed perfectly in order. Such a wonderful completion. An amazing outcome of a lifelong journey. Celebration was in order. I had no clue exactly how that would be, but there was time to think while bathing. It only took a short time to cleanse myself. It gave me the perfect opportunity to inspect my glorious new body from head to toe. All the imperfections of old age, all the blemishes, gone. It was hard not to become vain about my new appearance. Such a rapid and quite welcome change. I would have to show it off. All those in my old village, they would know now of my pride. Redstone would be a far longer journey for the old-aged version of me, but now I could run, sprint, jump, climb. I didn't need paths or trails to make my way now. Donning new clothing of a forest green tunic with black huntsman pants, I finally was ready to set out. The door closed behind me with a shimmering chime, signaling the locking of the spell. With a hand upon my trusted axe at my belt, my feet carried me off. It was a straight shot to the village, directly through a deep valley in the mountain pass. A crevice full of loose rocks, boulders, dangerous monsters, and powerful winds. Something I was excited to experience again. I'd never adventured much in my young age. It truly became more commonplace to me once I had been banished out of the village. No place to go, only myself to depend upon at that point. But now I had the experience and the strength. The travel was fairly mild-mannered for a short while. Nothing but light snowfall and a minimally chilling breeze. Not even many creatures seemed to be bounding about, aside from a very small deer fawn and a little flock of birds. I wasn't disappointed though. Eager for a fight or test of strength? Sure, but not seeking one out particularly. The jagged fanged beast from my quest for the mushroom was a fine enough trophy to brag about, but still, should another challenge arise, I would take it head on without fear. The pass looked far less intimidating than it had before. Though still a valley of shadows and darkness, it had no merit to its looks. A small smirk appeared upon my face, showing bright white teeth with eager anticipation. It felt strange to be climbing again, jumping down giant rocky ledges onto smaller ones, balancing along a steep, tiny trail, sidling to the rocky edges of the canyon I was slowly descending into. In short time, the bottom finally met with my feet. I'd made it down the wall of the chasm without fault, a proud accomplishment in my book. Ahead, The valley would continue to the left, a large incline to the right of dull gray stone leading up to a short peak and down towards the village. Either trail would work, but my urge to see the beauty of the land from up high won the decision, quickly spurring me to the right side. It would be quicker anyway, or at least I was sure it would. The chasm below slowly began to shrink with every inch of altitude gained along the ramping rocks. Trees and foliage began to meld together into thick green rivers, the lightly snow-tipped brush becoming one with the ground. It was an impressive sight, an experience I'd never thought I would feel again. The wind picked up and grew colder with each step. I welcomed the nipping ice at my nose. The rocky path began to dwindle, becoming not much wider than a horse in certain parts. Crags within the mountainside were carved neatly from constant exposure to the elements, providing me with ample room to traverse around. Rocks and huge boulders stood above me along the ridge, held back by only a few small and old, but perfectly placed stones. One jarring motion, and at the very moment I had been thinking of it, it happened. A powerful gust of wind suddenly swept forth, knocking me against the wall. Small bits of cracked rock crumbled down upon me, followed by a few other larger portions barely missing me. A quick look up showed a dangling boulder, a set of them to be more precise, inching towards the edge. I leapt to the side just in time as they gave way. The wind was silenced by the sound of crumbling and crushing rock for a brief time. I winced and curled slightly, feeling the earth shattering around me, far closer than desirable. As suddenly as it had begun, the moment ceased, the fading echo of stones tumbling across the mountainside and birds fluttering in fear, all to be heard. The trail behind me had been decimated. A gaping hole now lay between my feet and the path they had just walked upon. Luckily, the way forward would still take me down the mountainside. At least, I hoped. Years of wear could have created the same situation on the other side. I had to move with haste, a little bit of worry prying itself into my head now. Being trapped upon this cliffside would not be ideal. The journey past the peak and around was rather dull, save for the beautiful view along the entire way. To describe such wonder would take days, though. Immaculate gorgeousness surrounded me, melting all concerns away. A heavy breath of relief left my lips as I rounded the bend. The trail downwards was in far better condition, and larger too. The challenging part had been fun, but it was refreshing to come upon something a little more certain. I made my way down the trail in good time and came out onto the pathway I'd originally set out upon. Cutting through the pass had saved me days of time. The village would be to my left, only a few miles away. Confidence flowed through me while strutting down the rock-lined road. Everything seemed to stand still at my beckoning. Animals looked at me and froze. The wind fell quiet between my breaths. Even the trees themselves halted their leaves in the breeze. Was this what true power felt like? Or perhaps just a surging energy of enjoyment? Never before had such an emotion of invincibility come over me. The world was on its knees at my very feet. That feeling wouldn't last all too long. In fact, the illusion of my all-powerful, immortal strength would be shattered within a very, very short time. A large plume of smoke, unnoticed before, rose high into the sky from the middle of the town. This was no simple campfire. Several other small trails of dark black clambered through the cold air around the rest of the village. Was this some sort of festival they'd arranged? My suspicions grew, the reluctance to draw closer to the town growing ever greater alongside them. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but something felt off. Pressing on, there was only one way to find out. I broke into a sprint, not stopping until a short ways before the small rock walls containing the town. That was definitely unnatural smoke. A pair of figures were gathered at the roadway into the village. Guards? It was a small farming community. There was no need for posted units, as there were in larger settlements. What could they possibly be doing there? I crept off the edge of the path. Finding out who they were was suddenly the most important task of all. It took time, but the brush served as perfect concealment to get near. That armor. That dark, earthly colored leather armor. And hoods. Those were the men who had passed me on my way back home. The 4 horse riders.